We have Sorcha O'Connor here. Sorcha is our nutritionist from Connolly's Red Mills. We have Nicky, who obviously did our first demonstration. We have Jane Davis, who's head of marketing for Connolly's Red Mills. We have Andrea Ryan from Treo Eile, and then we have Sam just down below the bottom of us. So guys, thanks a million for great demos. So we're just going to talk, I suppose we finish up on the demos. So all those exercises, people at home here, is there one key exercise you would give people starting off their with their racehorses? What would be, the first step on it? I know, Nicky, you kind of went through it, but people going home here tonight say, right, we're going to go home here. That's your one bit of advice.
One bit of advice, I think start in trot. Take it slow, start in trot, and then progress from there, because, you can't run before you can walk.
And what, so the difference between an off-the-track thoroughbred and a young event horse, do you basically just start them the same?
Yeah, I'd start them exactly the same. I don't think, you're starting a thoroughbred horse right from the very word go. Just because he's a little bit older, he has got to completely relearn what he has done, what he's been programmed to do his entire life. So we want to teach, ostensibly the young event horse and the retraining racehorse to do exactly the same thing. So yeah, starting the same.
Jane, onto yourself here. You have been very successful. You have your own off-the-track thoroughbred as well, Mossy. You started at the very beginning. Tell us a little bit about your tale with Mossy.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a big part of why we were so keen to partner with Treo Eile and put on a day like today was, Nicky alluded to it in the demo, the opportunities that are being provided by Treo Eile, the incentives to consider taking on your thoroughbred. And I suppose I consider myself so lucky to have, ended up with a lovely horse who came off the track. He only ran once as a 2-year-old. I think if you look up his form, he was beaten 50 lengths in Dundalk on his only run, so I reckon that's lapped if you're in Dundalk. But he had the most beautiful temperament, and he literally just walked into my life one day. I was helping at the start at an unaffiliated event in Lisgarvan, and the rest was history. But the retraining had been, a lovely job of retraining had been done by Sarah Neville, and I was just so lucky to take him on. But a huge part, in fact, probably the most significant part of my decision to buy him, it was a big purchase, I hadn't had my own horse in years, was the Treo Eile. The Showing Pathway series had just launched, and I kind of said, at least we'll have a lane. He'll have a route to go. We'll have a bit of fun. And I've been so lucky. He showed through the Novice Pathway series my first season. The second season, we did the Open showing, and we did a couple of the Stepping Stones. And then we said, jeepers, we chanced our arm at this eventing. I'd never been a member of Eventing Ireland until last year. I never in my wildest dreams thought, turning 40, I'd be chancing my arm trying to event a horse. And it's been a steep learning curve, but it's through Treo Eile that we've had just the most unbelievable fun. So I think today is about, I suppose, we've seen the two professionals do such a phenomenal job with two incredible horses, but that route is there for people and the opportunities are there, and at all levels. You can dip your toe in really gently at the novice showing level. You compete in the snaffle, you just do a lovely individual show, you're not even asking for a judge to ride them, and then you can progress all the way through that. And yeah, I suppose I've just, that's a big point. We're just so grateful for what Treo Eile are doing for the thoroughbreds, and from Connolly's Red Mills perspective, we are partners with Treo Eile and have a huge amount of respect for what they're doing to promote the rehoming of thoroughbreds. The thoroughbred industry is a huge part of our business. Anyone who did the mill tour today can see the sheer scale, and we would feel it's our responsibility to play a role in that piece, and obviously the small contribution we make to Treo Eile, but that was what today's event was all about.
Andrea, that leads us on to Treo Eile. Tell us a little bit about Treo Eile. What are your goals? And then maybe tell us a little bit about the Eventing Ireland crossover.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much to Connolly's for coming on board as our partner. We're delighted to partner with Connolly's, and already they've organised a webinar for us last night and this today, so they're clearly very committed to the education and training piece. I can't take very much credit for what's been going on in Treo Eile for the last few years. That's really down to Anne O'Connor and Melanie and the board, because they've been working really hard. Treo Eile is going 5 years now, and I've only joined in the last 6 months. But since I've come into Treo Eile, I just can't get over the passion of the people who are working in Treo Eile, and also the passion of the people who have thoroughbreds. So I think, as Jane mentioned, it is nice to have those competition pathways for horses, and you compete against other breeds, and also some, potential to compete against other thoroughbreds. But really none of that can happen without good training and good education pieces. So, I think demo days like today are great, and it's fantastic to have it streamed so that people can, go away, start doing their bit of work, and then think, well, what did Nicky say, or what did Sam say, and go back and look at it again. So all that material is going to be up on the Connolly's website and on our website, and there to watch over and over again. So we've surveyed some of the riders in the last few weeks, and we're still, anybody here who hasn't done our survey, we keep going on about our survey, but it's closing at the end of the month. But we're
it's
really
free
interested.
to join Treo Eile, isn't it? So you go online, it's free for you to join up.
It's free to join,
register
yeah.
your horse,
but what we're trying to do is give back to people what they're looking for, and I think people really have said to us they want more training and they want more opportunities, because you can see how fantastic the thoroughbreds are. They can do everything. They can race, they can jump, they can do dressage. But, it does take careful riding and careful training, because it is a big transition for them. So this is a big part of what we're trying to do. And in terms of our supports, I guess, I suppose, like eventing was the thing I used to like to, a bit like Jane, I'd try my chance my arm at it. I couldn't ride like either of these two, but I think it's a very natural home for thoroughbreds, and I suppose that's where we're focused a lot of our attention, that and the showing, and also we're trying to just engage with thoroughbreds across all the disciplines, really.
And there's plenty of incentives to join Eventing Ireland this year, so it's free to register your horse, and then you have subsidised entry fees, isn't that right?
That's right. So at the very start of it, to register with us is free, and then yes, you can register your 0 points horses, or your restricted horse is free of charge, and then as you go up through the points, it's the same amount off that registration, and then there's a 30% discount on the registration fee. So certainly anybody competing at a metre, the registration is fully free. And part of that is to try and encourage people to register with Eventing Ireland rather than doing it on the day ticket, so they get the full benefits of Eventing Ireland membership. And this year we've launched, Anne has organised with a number of the events to run thoroughbred only classes over 90 centimetres in a metre, for that sort of grassroots level. So people, maybe people like myself who just kind of get into eventing, or maybe a little bit later in life, can compete with other thoroughbreds. So you're not always going in against, Nicky and Sam on the really flash young horses, knocking it out of the park in the dressage, and, so that you can compete with like sometimes. So I think that's going to prove popular this year.
And there's some more incentives as well with Show Jumping Ireland as well. There's plenty of, and your mare, registering your mares, there's plenty of incentives. If you go online onto the Treo Eile website, you'll be able to...
Yeah, there's loads there. So we're pushing them out week on week. I think we can hardly keep up with them ourselves. But the sports registration package is free of charge for Show Jumping Ireland, again, to encourage people to go that route. And also we have the horse registration, no matter what level it's at, is free of charge as well if it's a Treo Eile registered thoroughbred. So hopefully that'll encourage more people to get out and about show jumping their horses as a prep for whether they're staying show jumping or they're going eventing. And similarly, we've just launched a broodmare breeding scheme, I suppose for people putting some thoroughbred back into sports horses. I know these full thoroughbreds do a brilliant job, but I think a bit of blood anywhere along the way helps the sport horse. So that's another incentive we've just launched recently, and that seems to be getting we're getting a lot of positive feedback about that one.
Super. Sorcha, you might tell us a little bit about the importance of nutrition within, you get your horse off the track. Where do you start? What do you do?
So we had a good webinar last night. It'll be recorded as well. Ulcers is obviously a huge issue with these retrained thoroughbreds, and we had an expert on last night explaining all about how their hindgut microbiome has basically been adapted to digest a lot of oats and a lot of starch, and that's for that quick release energy. That's traditionally how they were fed. So we're trying to move away from that with more high fibre and more high oil diets, like Nicky mentioned, the Ultra Cube that she has easy game on. So it's basically a slow release energy. So we're just basically maintaining their behaviour and trying to get it easy going, so you're not just adding an extra fizz. So nutrition can play a huge role. I think in human nutrition we're only realising how important it is, And that's even more important for the horse because their hindgut it's their whole engine really. That's where all the energy is coming from.
So someone, perhaps they go get their horse, they come out and they go, oh, they're well able to contact you, they can get onto you guys, and nutritionists can come out, they can put a plan together for you. It's not a case of, oh God, don't feed him and he won't be fizzy.
Absolutely.
It, as Sam keeps saying, the hangry thing, I think is a great one. They get hangry no more than us. They're going, oh God, they've been on this high oat, high energy feed, and then we go, oh, we just won't feed them. We'll just give them hay and grass. That'll calm them down. Sometimes it's the complete opposite. They need that hindgut moving. They need, maybe they possibly have ulcers. So to reach out to anyone online, or you as nutritionists you're there to help, you're there to give a guide.
Absolutely, we're here. It's a free service. Like you can call us if you're on a different competitor brand. We're not going to try poach or anything. We can advise on other products. If you think your horse does better on that's absolutely fine. All that information is available online for other products too, so we can advise it that way too. So don't be afraid to reach out. And of course, like even your racehorse, it needs to adapt to the way you have been maintaining it now. So maybe he's out in grass for the first time, maybe he was in a racing yard that he's never known to be turned out. So obviously they're going to have to relearn how to digest their new diet too. So it'll all take time in that transition period, and it does take a bit of handling, so don't be afraid to reach out for advice.
Sam, you're a big fan of the thoroughbreds. You've ridden them, pre-trained them, not necessarily for to do this job, but to go back onto the track, rehabilitated horses. Tell us, maybe there's people here that are interested in getting a thoroughbred. I know they can go on to Treo Eile or they can go to yards. Where would you begin? What advice would you give to someone where would they start?
In terms of finding them, or when when you find when they come into the yard? I mean, I think what this is doing, like, Treo Eile is this massive fishing rod to give us, if I'm being honest, it gives us a purpose. We're like, okay, this is what we'll do. What we'll all realize is that horses give us the purpose. It's the journey. It's taking a horse from one career into another career, whether it's the show ring, whether it's eventing, whether it's jumping, and it is just so enjoyable. This is what I've been doing today, and the journey I've been on with Nominator. I'm not going to want to jump around badminton for the rest of my life. I'll get scared at some point. I don't know when that will be. But what I can see myself doing in 20 years' time, poor Sparks is probably going mad saying, please don't say that out loud, but it is this journey of retraining a horse. It's so much fun. So go to your trainers, just let them know if you're looking and for something suitable, because you've seen Easy Game, you've seen Nominator and things like that. There's going to be, like, lots of horses need a retirement career. Some of them, whether it's soundness reasons, like me, I don't know will I be able to ride in 20 years time, so I might want to retire in the field. That might have to be it for me. Some it might be hacking, some it might be showing, some it could be eventing. So you're kind of saying to trainers all the time, you might ride out in a yard, or you might have done it in the past, or you might not want to do that, but just talk to them and say, look, I'm really interested when you got a horse that you think might retrain well for this job. So you're letting them know, create the demand, let them know it's there. When you get a horse into the yard, two things. The type of work you're going to do, Nicky was talking about starting in trot. I love with the lateral suppleness. That's one thing. Unlike a young horse who doesn't know what contact is, or doesn't know what even having a rider on their back is, these horses, they've loads of work done for you. You're so far ahead in some departments, which is great, and in other things, you're going to have to introduce new skill sets, new muscle groups. So, and a lot of the time it is around that suppling. So getting the back to bend, as I was talking about, and that kind of lateral work, which feels a bit flat worky, it's very good for them. But as they start to stretch, and then as they start to kind of go a little slower, and they're taking a little more weight on their hind leg, and it's all delicate, it's all gentle, it's not about pulling their hands off. They're not going to feel wonderful in the mouth all the time, because they've been going quite fast. Be delicate, start with the suppleness. Remember, though, from a nutrition point of view, that you are now building new muscle groups. The thing that always surprises me is, like, we take horses who have been running at Cheltenham, and they come for like a fresh, they come for this kind of work. Certain trainers and certain owners are thinking, like, this could be good for the horse within its racing career. And it always fascinates me how a horse who can run over 3 miles at averaging over 800 meters per minute can come in, and after 20 minutes of flat work can be really tired. So fuel it, and help with the recovery. And it's not just it's not just we had to get Nominator just to get him back in love with food. He had actually gone out, he just hadn't loved the world he had been in. It hadn't suited him. It'd be like putting me in an office or something. He was just a bit down on himself. So he had lost a lot of weight and he'd lost his appetite. We had to start on the mash, on the horse care mash, just to get him to eat. It's like slop. He was like, oh, okay, this is a bit more interesting. And then we could get in the ultra cubes and we could kind of build him up that way. He had to go onto the NutriGuard to help with the hindgut. But then, me being ambitious and wanting to train that athlete, as soon as we could get weight on him, we didn't do much of them for 3 months. It was more just a rehabilitation. But then when he was ready for exercise, and given the talent that he had and the kind of background that we had, we did move quite quickly, physically. So we had to fuel that. And that, again, that's where he taught me a lot about the hangriness. He's a forward-thinking, active horse. He's alert. He's the type of horse that me from 20 years ago would have thought, Asher, just give him some hay and put him out in the field, he'd be grand. But the work then causes him, those muscles need to recover. And
did you back off him in those 3 months? Did you stop riding, or did you ride him through it when you're trying to build him up? What did you do?
Yeah, no, first 4 weeks, no, just looking at him, I didn't sit on him because it was just, you're just trying to get him happy in his environment. We had to play around with what stable he needed to be in. He's a quirky guy as well. He's got a friend here with him and stuff like that. So it was new environment, new routine. That when he was going out in the paddock, we're trying to get him to relax out in the paddock and not be kind of just going, okay, I'm going to come back in at next point. He was trying to anticipate everything. So it was very much a kind of a sort of a natural horsemanship type start. Then it was groundwork.
Jane, this is a little bit like they saying earlier on with your mare being very stressy and that. So this is...
Yeah.
And I think that can be a really stressful thing when they don't want to eat as owners. And it came up last night even in the talk with Ben, how is our own human perception of what we think the horses are feeling or thinking. And I think, to Sam's point on the fuel and the nutrition, it's patience when it comes to the feeding was definitely my own experience. And it's so hard because we want to rush, we want to change things, and this isn't working, so we'll change it again, and we only give it a few days, and all of a sudden we don't know what is working and what isn't. It's definitely worth chatting to Sorcha and the team in terms of maybe looking at a diet plan, because that restlessness, that anxiety, that can often be coming from the gut. You hear it in the human side, the whole gut-brain axis. We talk a lot about happy tummy, happy horse, and Sorcha's done a huge amount of research on this. There's a lot of science to it, but as humans, I know from my own personal experience, I can sometimes be just in a hurry to want to fix a problem, be it condition or be it temperament or the anxiety piece. So I think that patience piece, knowing what you're feeding your horses to, where you're starting from, know your starting point. What's not measured can't be improved. And making those changes gradually, being patient about the changes and seeing what impact it's making. Refer back to the experts, be it your trainers or be it to the likes of Sorcha and our technical team. Because the nutrition, I genuinely believe, makes a huge impact in terms of their overall temperament, well-being, their mood as such. I know Sam said that years ago, and it stuck with me so much.
It's because I get hungry. It's because I get hungry.
You and me both.
Yeah.
But I even see it now in my own horse. I was on the Horse Care Ultra Cubes. I'm very lucky. My horse is exceptionally laid back. I'm now looking for more energy. I'm a pre-fuel user at the events, and Sam said to me, I need to kick more. But it's the role it can play in terms of that performance. But I think if it is something that you are looking to build a consistent plan, you have your horse, it's definitely worth touching base with our team. And it's I suppose my takeaway has been the patience piece, and just, as I say, really paying attention, making your changes small, and understanding from the inside out the role that each of the products that you're using, if it's something to look at gut, if it's something to support the muscle, and that overall well-being piece.
Spark spends far more time on the yard than I do, and sees the horses and can kind of observe. So finding a place where they're most relaxed and it could be anywhere. So Juki started eating in the field. So because I was going why are we feeding him in the field? The birds are going to get it and all the rest. And it was no, Sam, he's eating. It's okay, find the place where he would do it. And it was kind of trial and error as well, because he wasn't particularly settled. You know, he'd go out and he'd gallop around, you wouldn't have thought it, but actually once he did that, and then he found, it was like, oh, I found food. And it was amazing, and that really worked for him. I think progress, not perfection as well. Like it's hard. When we go to shows with Juki, I was somewhere recently, Treo Eile, last weekend, and he was stabling somewhere the night before, and he climbing he not in a kind of mad climbing the walls way that he would have done the first time we had him, but he's still a little bit himself. Like, you're never going to completely change him, but he's, he just relaxes then a lot quicker and stuff like that. So yeah, I think to not, a little bit like when I made a mess of the fence, to not panic, but just look for, okay, where could that next little game be? Finding a routine, I think, and an environment that helps him to settle. But honestly, I think it's also the exception. Like, Jane's horse is so laid back as well. I think that the one thing that we're guilty of sometimes, and I'm doing it all the time when I'm talking about the jump and stuff like that, is we do sometimes pigeonhole horses into a box. And there's the great thing about Treo Eile is what we're learning with these, we're just appreciating the diversity of the temperaments, the athletic types of these horses that come out of training, and that they have second careers, not just as companions, not just as hacking, but actually as, hopefully for Juki now, who's pretty high up on the international stage, they can be really good athletes as well in a second career.
It's almost comforting knowing that it happens to professionals, that we're not sat at home going, oh God, you have access to the exact same people we have access. All I've heard, I've heard free. There's so many, for Jane, for example, to be able to contact any of you, to get the nutritional plan, to get onto Treo Eile, to register. There's so much advice and everything out there for people, so which is very refreshing to hear.
I just wanted to make a couple of points about the feeding. I suppose two things, and one of the things that came up last night in the webinar is that horses coming out of training are kind of addicted to, high energy, hard feed. So it's probably like every now and then when I give up sugar, I get, fairly irate. So it takes them a while to adapt, because they are very addicted to the feed they're on. So I think that's a piece. And the other thing is horses in racing yards, they're never on their own. They're always with other horses, they're always ridden with other horses, they're always brought in, brought out. So they're never on their own. And I've had 2 or 3 horses come out of training, and they've always been quite similar. They tend to fret if you take them away from the other horses, and they won't eat so well if they don't feel comfortable and safe. So they, feeding them out in the field until they just get their appetite back, whatever it takes, I think, really. So I think it does take, probably that 3-month period for them to realise this is my new life. And the great thing about thoroughbreds, I think, is they're incredibly willing, incredibly forgiving, and incredibly kind, So, I've worked, I guess, over the years with a lot of different breeds, and, I have to say I'm a fan of thoroughbreds because they'll always give you a second chance and a third chance. But they're coming out of a completely different environment, and they tend to be a little bit institutionalized in racing yards. So I think it just takes them a lot of time to relax and get into that new lifestyle.
Yeah, and just to mention about Easy Game there, although he looked like the consummate professional today, I remember the first time Debbie pitched up in the yard for a lesson last year, June time, I suppose, and he screamed the place down, absolutely screamed the place down, couldn't own himself. Debbie couldn't hear me talking, like it was just, negotiate some kind of session, and that was it. And she came a couple of times, and every time he came, he was a little bit better and a little bit better. And even when he arrived into the yard, he was still, a little bit upset, and, even now if he goes out for a hack on his own, he'd still rather company. So, even though he looked very good today, he's also been on a journey. It hasn't just been plain sailing the whole time, but he is where he is now. So,
and I think to that point too, I've said it a couple of times now, my own horse is very quiet, but take him away. This first time he went to Balmoral for the Working Hunter, like, he didn't eat, he went off his food. I was asking Sorcha, how many pre-fuels can you give a horse in a day? I was like, God, is he going to be able to perform? But since then he's adapted. But like that, I was the one that panicked. So it is about almost planning ahead, knowing what tools you have in your toolbox. If you settle them into one routine, but you're going to do something new, do you bring your bit of mash with you if you're staying somewhere different that's going to be a bit more appetizing, or do you have access to your pre-fuel refuels? These are all, I call them the nutritional toolkit. But like that, we can be guilty of almost over panicking or over worrying, but it's to kind of get ahead of those changes and introduce them as quietly as you can.
And by the way, we're just talking about horses really as well. Like, so with the other, I've had sport horses with all these same things. So that information is amazing. I've just normally paid a lot more for the sport horse than I did for the horse that came out of training.
But so many of these national hunt or flat horses, they've been maybe bought or sold as a foal, and they'll be bought, again, store horses, 302, depending on what they are. And they've, been at sales. They've never really, you'd very rarely have a national hunt breeder that breeds just one foal, that they're on their own. Whereas you might have, Jane would breed her Connemara there, for example, in a lovely lush field, grass field in Meath, quite happily on its own, so it doesn't strive for that company. So, Andrea, you said they might be a little bit institutionalised. I always think a lot of them are institutionalised. They've been to boarding school, they've been fed at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I find, the first lot's on the gallop. Remember, they're fed at 6, first lot on the gallop at 7. They mightn't have had time to even finish their breakfast. They'll be ridden an hour on the walker, and their belly at this stage is, and national hunt horses, 10, 11, 12, maybe 13, retire, and that is, they're kind of chasing the tail a little bit. So I think it's just key, any of the ones I've had, is straight away nutritional bank, sort out their belly, happy gut. I'm a massive fan of the NutriGuard. I said to Jane earlier on, it's like get my kids to brush their teeth. I'm like, put it in every day, like religiously. I give it to the ponies, I give it to the older horses. It is my go-to with the oils. But is there a top tip there you could give? We'll go through you all there, kind of a top tip for everyone here, and then we'll open the floor there to any questions then.
Yeah, I would say go back to their natural behaviours. Where are they happiest? Horses outside eat more, forage more than ones kept inside, so turnout would be key. See, and don't be afraid that they're going to get injured, just keep everything really consistent. So there's studies published lately that show that inconsistency in turnout is actually what's causing those injuries and not turnout itself. So just get a routine in place where a horse can be a horse. I haven't really met any horses that care about their brand new rugs or their shiny sables. They really just want to be with their friends, and they want to be foraging, and they want the freedom to be a horse rather than just being exercise. So just take it back to what they actually want and stop thinking about what you think they want.
I think for me, it's about keeping things simple. I think it's very easy to overcomplicate management, feeding, training, every aspect of it. Oh, I must do this because they're doing that, and I must feed this because that, they're feeding something else. I learned a long time ago that, more is not necessarily more. And it was a very old experienced vet that said, horses aren't designed for all these, highfalutin feeds. Keep it simple with the feeding, and start from the bottom and work your way up, and rather than giving it everything to start with and overloading the system, just even though it's with the best of intentions, start with it being as simple as you possibly can, be it in your training or in your management feeding regime.
Jane?
I think for me, it's just enjoy the journey, enjoy the whole process of getting to know your horse, and enjoy the small wins. That could be just simply going into an away arena and not having a spook, or your first 90, or your first day out, or even just the basics at home. It's such a privilege to have these horses, and there's an awful lot to be got by the journey. It's not just about the red rosettes. Having that kind of training progress, even I think I've gotten some most satisfaction out of that, nearly more so than even competing. But yeah, enjoy getting to know your horse and building up that relationship, and take all of the satisfaction out of the small wins, no matter what they are.
So for me, I think a lot of it is, I suppose, once you have a thoroughbred, it's hard to go back, really. So part of our survey, a lot of people felt other people in their sport were a bit negative about thoroughbreds, but the people who'd had them really liked them. Like, they're fantastic horses. They forgive us way more than we forgive them. And one of the things, I suppose, going back to our webinar last night with Ben and Sorcha, Ben said that horses are actually excellent communicators. We just don't listen all that much. And I thought it was a really good point. So I think, everyone made the point riding today, listen to your horse, and, they'll help you along the way.
Yeah, I mean, we've given so much detailed advice along the way, but it's funny because I was on the line of these two my advice is just start. You know, like I think, you know, get a horse. I think that's the hardest thing is this, the pathways that Treo Eile have given, the different opportunities, you know, whatever it's going to be, and start wherever you're comfortable starting. But if you're thinking about it, if you're kind of confident enough to think, look, I think I want to do this, it'll be, you know, don't in a year's time be looking back going, oh geez, I never did anything about it. They're fantastic. It is just about the journey. The information is there, the knowledge sharing is there. You know, we live in a world of AI and all that kind of stuff. That's not a bad place to consult from time to time. And then get away from the screens as well, and actually go and put it into practice and just start with these animals, because they're amazing, you know. And it's a really meaningful thing as well to provide this second career and this next life and this next journey for them. But what you will figure out once you've started is that the journey that you guys go on as well is fantastic.
Sam, just reminding me, obviously, with your Equi-Ratings hat on, and you're talking about the resources that are out there, there is a couple of really good podcasts, and again, talk about finding your information from loads of different sources. So the Foreign Equine Grassroots podcast is a great listen as well. It's very much focused at the grassroots riders, and we've also done a Red Mills documentary. So if you were on the mill tour today or you didn't get a chance to go on it, you can kind of listen to it in your ears, maybe some entertainment driving home. But yeah, the Equi-Rating podcasts are a great source of education as well. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Jane. Plug in the Eventing podcast.
That's absolutely super. So I think we'd like to thank everybody. First of all, we'd like to thank you guys for coming today, and hopefully you're going to be able to pull away plenty of knowledge and tips and tricks. If you go onto the Red Mills website, you'll be able to look up the nutritional guides or get in contact with any of the team. Jane is also on hand there. She's very accessible for any old questions. Andrea on thoroughbreds.com, or Anne, who's mostly in the office, or Melanie, who's down below there. The girls are great at helping you. There's so many incentives out there for the thoroughbreds. There's no reason, you know, to hit a stumbling block, because there's so many people out there that are all willing to help you. It's all free. There's so much free advice. So we hope to see most of you out and about in the summer, or certainly next year. And thank you all again for coming, and a huge thanks to Gores Bridge for having us here, and to Jane and to all the team at Treo Eile for pulling it all together. So thank you very much, everybody, and safe home.